It's time to rethink, renew, and reimagine retirement. Welcome to Retire Repurposed. This podcast is dedicated to help people transition into fulfilling and purposeful retirements. Retirement is a big life change. In fact, the two most dangerous years of a person's life are the year they were born and the year they retire. We believe that retirement is not the end, rather the beginning of what could be the most impactful season of a person's life. So don't retire, become repurposed. Well, I'm your host, Jared Sebesta. Thank you so much for joining us today. Well, on this latest episode of Retire Repurposed, we are continuing our mini-series exploring newfound lessons since publishing his first book, Repurposed, Ben Tages, back in 2017. Today, we're going to dive into this concept of walking into your greatness during retirement. In this podcast, we discuss how retirement can be the time of profound personal growth, self-discovery, and allowing your inner light to shine brightly. Enjoy this episode. Hey folks, welcome back to the show. Jared Sebesta joining you once again, and we are continuing this series that we have spent now 5 weeks on, talking about some of the things that Ben Tages has learned, or at least re-emphasized, since writing his original book, Repurposed, The Untold Story of Retirement America, back in 2017. We've talked about how retirement lands different for other people, how work really gets a bad rap, and there are so many positive aspects of work. And last week on the show, we talked about how really at the end of the day, your legacy is all about the time that you spend with your family. Is there a financial piece to retirement and a financial piece to your legacy? Certainly, and we're not discrediting that. But when it comes down to time, talent, and treasure, your time is by far the most important part, and that's the part your family wants. Ben Tages joins me on the show now, and I think last week's show was really important, and it's certainly a flavor of other shows and kind of an overarching theme that we always preach on this podcast. But I think it just goes back to this whole idea that retirement and your end of life is bigger than just the amount of wealth or inheritance that you leave to the next generation.
Yeah, really, it's about being able to focus on your people impact, Jared. And I think whenever I go and visit with people, not necessarily retirement age, that too, but certainly people nearing end of life. And I'm not saying if you're retiring, that's where you're at. But when you start to talk to people about nearing the end of their life, the stories of people come up all the time, right? And we know that people impact is what lasts, and that is what will of us can carry on into future generations. Mm-hmm. I just don't think we prioritize it enough. Sure. We talk about it, right, but that should change the way we live our lives. Mm-hmm. And for many of us, me included, as we go through our lives, the world gets a hold of us. The world says, okay, come over here with me. Let's do this. Let's chase this dream. Let's do that. You need this. You need that. And we are so constantly bombarded by that we end up falling for it. And we fall for the lie, and we end up going places that we know are not places that we should be. It's taking our heart away from what's most important, yeah, right, and bring us other places. So once in a while, I think, again, like we ended last show, take an inventory of your time and your talent. What are you doing with it, and does it line up to what you know is most important?
Yeah, I'm kind of sensing as to why perhaps people don't do this, and I'm making very broad brush generalizations here, but relationships are hard. You know what I mean? I mean, lots of times by the time you've been on planet Earth with family here for a couple of decades, there's some rifts, there's some broken relationships there, and to start to kind of mend those, perhaps eyeball the end of life with some of those rifts there, that takes a lot of guts and courage to do that. It's almost easier just to leave a check once you're gone. And again, I'm not trying to trivialize this in any way, shape, or form, but in some respects, you're just leaving the check, even if it's large, almost seems like the easy part.
Yeah, and believe me, I've seen it many times where the answer is, man, I wish this has almost caused us more problems than it has, gains, because, we really want more mom and dad, and we think that the financial side, it just there's still that hole, right? Mm-hmm. And no matter what financial resources come out of losing family members, people still end up wanting more of those family members. So I think a great financial plan with a integrated wealth transfer plan is super important. But I think the legacy piece is as important and needs to be talked about more.
Yeah, and again, that's really the hard part of life is that people impact, and that's where it can really get messy in a lot of areas. But go back, listen to last week's show. That was a really, really great show and very encouraging and inspiring to people that whether you're retired or not, I think it's always good to hear about how we can be more intentional with our time, because that truly is one of the more finite things here on planet Earth. So go back and listen to that show. That tees up this show really, really well. We're going to continue kind of down this thread of time. Again, another aspect that was emphasized in your first book, Repurposed, The Untold Story of Retirement in America, but something that you've kind of grown to understand is even more important, and maybe, I don't want to say underemphasized, but really you've seen how this message continues to be needed, and it really comes down to a retiree, stepping into a new phase of life. Let's talk about this.
Yeah, Jared, we've talked about this idea of becoming, walking into your fullness of who God's created you to be. And it even is on our logo, and we don't talk about it a lot, in the Repurposed book. But I think we tend to see retirees as a society as less than for some reason. I think culture does that, and it doesn't feel to me like you're walking into something greater and fuller. It almost seems like people think they're walking into something less than, like they're stepping away from importance versus coming into fullness. I can remember when I first saw the cover of the book, Repurposed, the original, and there was a series of moons across the top. And this was before I'd even come up with this concept. This was strictly our design team working on the logo. And there's a sliver of moon going from, kind of the small moon to kind of a half moon to new moon and the full moon. And I remember seeing that logo and not really liking it at first. I mean, I get the idea that you're coming into fullness, but then it kind of dawned on me. The moon itself is not a light source. Now, if you're out for a walk some night and you look up at this big, bright moon, you're thinking there's a light source there that's illuminating my path. The reality of it is the moon itself is just a big rock. It does not illuminate anything without the sun, right? Its job is to reflect the sun's light onto the earth. Well, our lives look like that too, right? So if we're coming into fullness, we should be reflecting more and more of Jesus Christ, right? The S-O-N, the Son, onto those around us, and again, illuminating their path, which is why I still love the logo. But again, I think many times in retirement, we see them as, you're actually doing less reflection of that. You're less important. You're less able to make a difference in the people around your lives.
Yeah. And again, that's such a stark contrast as to what you are suggesting, where this is now, I don't want to say the final phase, because we want to say that retirement is kind of the final phase, but a new phase closer to the end of your life, where this is actually a phase of more, not less. I don't mean more money or more leisure time, but really where you start beginning to morph, evolve, and change and reflect God's light even more. And it's just such a paradox compared to what we're sold.
Yeah, think about what society's telling you. You're looking at the pictures of people on the beach, and they're just enjoying their leisure time, and it's no more, you're not, it's all about you, right? And I think there's time for that, and most people, the most enjoyable rest time and leisure time they get come out of leaving or having some purpose, purposeful living. We call that earned rest. So it's hard to earn rest when you're actually not earning anything, right? And you're not adding value. But when I see people buying into that lie, my heart sinks, right? Because I know these folks have so much more to give, and I get the benefit of sitting by them. I sit across the table from them. I get the wisdom from them. A lot of my ideas come from this age group. but too often times they're like, yeah, I'm not as much, or I'm just kind of trying to, phase out, right? You hear that a lot. It's like, yeah, I'm gonna let the younger people take over. You hear about that in church leadership a lot. It's like, well, the young people got to start pulling their weight. We're out of here. The reality of it is, young people with those mentors is really the most important part.
A couple of shows ago, we titled this show "The Real Reason You're Tired of Working," which I thought was a great title. A little biased because we came up with it, but in that show, you mentioned why so many people that are heading into retirement are just kind of sick and tired of working. It's not because you're not able to add value. It's that you're you're kind of growing out of a strength. Because when you're young, it's kind of like there's more tenacity, there's more grit, you're learning, and then something happens at about midpoint, 40, 50 years old, where now there's like this wisdom takes over and you actually add more value, using your wisdom to create value than really, maybe your back and kind of horsepower. And that was done back when you were younger. My point is that curve doesn't go down the older you get, it goes up. But yet what you just described from people's mentalities and from society is that you actually kind of peak out before the end, unlike kind of the boon phase. And again, there's a paradox there. So again, what do we need to do, or what mind shifts do we need to take on so we don't look at retirement like that?
Well, you got to realize your strengths might look different than what they did, and don't let that get you down, but help that encourage you. Back to that show, it's all about harnessing that wisdom to impact other people.
Sure.
And allows that upshot, right? The ability to just look at how much more impactful you can be on an organization, on your family, and your community is through empowering others.
Sure.
The reality is I can only do so much on my own, right? That's kind of how our business looks here, Jared. I mean, now, this financial business, we got 10, 12 people all working together, and I can leave and actually go do other things, and it continues to do even better many times without me. So I think what's unique and what I've seen is, I can only take on so much work when I was a younger, planner, I was a younger advisor. But now we've got a whole team of people who are doing that. If I can impart on them what's important and help them grow, again, the multiplier is so much greater. So I think retirees need to look at their lives that way too. Utilize the wisdom that they have now, utilize their strength, which is very different from what it was.
Yeah.
Don't look down on that. Look at that as your most powerful asset to bring to the next generation.
Talk about what role that plays. Again, the idea here is that you're coming into fullness. We want to continue to add value. You've said on shows past that, retirement is not a biblical concept that, like just because, we're an American and have enough money that we could or should, and certainly nothing against it. But talk about the role of like using that wisdom, imparting that wisdom on other people and adding value. Talk about the role that plays into you kind of stepping into your fullness.
Jerry, I think we got to get away from this idea that, we're born, we go to school to learn about our new purpose, right? And that's going to be our job. And then someday we're going to end our purpose and retire. We're created from conception. Like God's put skills, abilities, talents into us. He has a plan for each and every one of us. The plan doesn't end just because you're 59 and a half or 65 or 72 whenever you decide to retire. Right. The beautiful thing is God has this plan for each and every one of us. Mm-hmm. He is going to shine his light on us so that we can illuminate that to those around us. Mm-hmm. So the beautiful thing about this is you can continue and should be continuing to learn more about that as you age. Mm-hmm. It just looks different in each season of life. So many times people think, I'm retiring, therefore, my growth is done, my ability to get closer to God, I can, maybe use a little more of my spare time, right? And that's something I used to say too, hey, just think this is a season where you're going to have more free time to be with the Lord.
Sure.
Well, the reality of it is you're going to fill that time with all kinds of stuff. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's plenty of other things out there. It should be intentional our entire lives, mm-hmm. right? Becoming closer to him, allowing, him to shine through us.
Yeah. I think too, as you shine perhaps in a new way or add value in a new way, I think that is what allows that light to really shine to come through. And through that process, that's really, I think, to use Christian terms as we use, is sanctification, right? Like I think that, correct me if I'm wrong here, but like, I don't think that the process of sanctification ever comes to an end. Like, just because you're retired now and you may think that you don't have to work anymore, therefore I don't have to add any value, and I'm using some heavy sarcasm here because that's not the case. All of a sudden now that process of letting my light come through and turning more into Him and shining His light comes to an end. I don't think people would say that or admit that or maybe articulate that, but you maybe get that feeling a lot. And to your point, I don't know why that stops or why it should stop, because at the end of the day, it really shouldn't.
No, it should continue. And I can't think of a better time, Jared, a more important time maybe to see that come through and to see people fully walk into fullness than somebody that's coming into their later years of life.
Yeah.
The retirement years, if you will, that typically society is going to have told us it is more for you time. You're this, you're that, which is all. Rest is good and important, and you've earned some of that, but I think you're going to enjoy that far more and walk into the purpose that God's created for you in that season a lot more if you're open to how He's leading you.
I think we spelled out a number of scenarios as to what it looks like to not do that. Again, we spent probably dozens of podcasts explaining the way that it maybe, I don't want to say shouldn't be done, but it's a miss to you really stepping in. Can you think of an example or give an example of somebody that you've seen, a client who retired but not just stopped working, but really stepped into a whole nother, I don't want to say dimension, but really a whole nother reality of life and really into their fullness?
Yeah, I mean, I see it all the time, Jared, and it's very different. I can think of several great examples, but they're usually the people who are able to see this as just part of their life. It wasn't we talk about the white knuckle retiree, like I'm so looking forward to just not having to work. These are people that come into retirement and they purposely plan out the best way to continue to grow and impact the people around them. Typically it looks like somebody who takes a good inventory of their skills, talents, and abilities. They say, okay, God, you've given me this lifetime of work. You've given me this, whether it be working in the home, whether it be working in a business, whatever that looks like. You've given me these abilities. I now have to repurpose them, to use the book title, into something different. Because the reality of it is that if you're moving out of the workforce, it will never look the same.
Yeah.
Like if you're not gainfully employed in that, and you're moving into that stage of life, it should be exhilarating. It should be like, okay, now I can do a complete look at every single one of those parts of my life and where I can best use, the skills, talents, and abilities in order to make a difference in the people around me. So it starts there with that inventory. It almost always starts with a season of rest. Too many times you see people come into retirement, they're like, oh, Ben, you always talk about being repurposed. I'm repurposed, and it's been a month, and I'm already doing this and that, and I got all these other things. That might be too quick. I think it's important to take a full Sabbath, to take that break, that season where you're able to rest and say, okay, what is next? There's nobody busier than somebody that says they just retired. The reality is people are like jumping all over. It's like, hey, you volunteer here, volunteer there. You do have to say no. And the most successful people I see in retirement are able to say no to the things that don't fully align with their passions, right? So we've got to keep that in mind as well. Yeah. We have to keep in mind, yes, skills, talents, abilities, but also what are you passionate about, and make sure you're saying yes to only those things.
It kind of makes me think back to that again, the same show where we talked about the real reason why you're sick and tired of working, and it might have something to do with you're just out of alignment with your current job. And I think this is a good time to kind of reiterate that point, that this isn't just for retirees. This is for like those people who are maybe have 5-10 years plus left in the working world. Like if it's out of alignment, like that should be our mindset all the time, not just in retirement. Like we should always be thinking about, how can I best steward all of the light that God gave me at conception to make that come out in my life, because that really is kind of the point of life. And I love what you said there, where the people who really retire well, they don't look at it as this like magic fairy tale time in the course of history. It's just me now not working, so now I can continue on this growth of letting God light shine through me.
Yeah, I mean, if you're in work that is unfulfilling, there's a reason for that. You know, and I'm not saying to somebody listening, I'm going to quit my job right away, but certainly you should be trying to get in a place where you want to go to work, right? And that's one of the easiest things to see new retirees find is like, man, I still kind of miss my job. It does happen. And those coaching people through that's a little bit easier than somebody who, doesn't have that same feeling. But if you're out there today and you're like, I don't like my job and I'm struggling with it, it's likely because, again, you're either not appreciated, which is unfortunately part of the problem in leadership today, but it also might be you're not in the right role. You're not able to use your skills, your talents in order to better impact the teams around you.
Yeah, it's kind of like a double-edged sword, where if somebody is in a job that they don't like, perhaps, for years, it makes them look at retirement as the ultimate fix, which almost pushes them to want to like steer away from this fullness journey, because in their opinion, like life was kind of drudgery because I spent so much time, at a job or career I really didn't like. So really, you're doing nobody any favors when you're staying at a job that isn't fulfilling and isn't really resonating with your soul.
Yeah, you're actually creating a bad workplace environment too, likely. So I'm always a fan of people that are nearing that retirement, age, if you will. And if things aren't going well, you have to get back to, your strengths in that moment. Yeah. Realize that the strengths that you had earlier might be changing. Back to that show about strength to strength and Arthur Brooks's recent book. I mean, that is such valuable information to realize, hey, I'm a different person than I was in my 30s. In my 40s, so I need to start shifting in a way that allows me to best utilize what God's given me, to best shine His light on those people around me. And if you're in a spot where you're not there, you need to start having the conversations to get in that spot. Don't just retire. Find something different that you can do to, again, you be part of your journey, right? The full life journey. It isn't worth retiring for now. It isn't certainly worth just waiting until retirement to become happy. I've found people when they retire, they've got the same problems that they had before they were retired. Generally, they just got more time to think about those problems. Yeah,
I heard on a podcast recently a gentleman kind of talking about the point of life, and that's obviously a pretty big topic there. But he was using this whole analogy of light, and I like sticking with it because again, it's tied back to the logo on your book Repurposed. But he says one of the reasons that we're here on planet Earth is to, and he used the word self-actualize, which is probably something not typically used in everyday English, but in the like personal development world, it's really coming to fruition. It's letting something that's kind of like a seed that's in there, like come to fruition where you become it. And he said something to the effect of like a reason why we're here on Earth is to self-actualize the light that God planted in us when He created us. And that was pretty powerful. And that gave me like a lot of empowerment. Like that gave me inspiration, because now all of a sudden that gives meaning to each and every day, to where now I have an opportunity to let that light shine, let God's light shine through me, just kind of like the full moon. But man, wouldn't it be something if retirees looked at their life like that, where instead of now it's like, no, I just get a chance to travel more and I don't have to go through the drudgery of work, where now I have full time to put into letting God's light shine through me. It's a totally different paradigm shift, but one that to me empowers a retiree, doesn't make them feel like, hey, you got to be doing more and it's time to step up. It should empower them, and that's what we're trying to do.
Yeah, it should get them excited about this season. I do have those conversations too, Jared, where you walk in, somebody's both nervous about retirement, about how I'm going to fill their day, but they're also not looking forward to it. This should be the most exciting exhilarating time where you're walking into complete fullness, right? Because you can take all of those life experiences, all of the things that you've learned, right, and focus even more on the people around you, your community, and make even a more significant impact on them. God made us all for something, right? And that doesn't end at retirement. It actually can come into fullness.
Securities offered through Avantax Investment Services. Member FINRA SIPC. Investment advisory services offered through Avantax Advisory Services. Insurance services offered through an Avantax affiliated insurance agency.